Yeah, so I have no idea why those got cut off. Um, I hope it's not like I can't use that account for making videos like this anymore. That's where like my crazy brain starts to be like, uh, it doesn't matter. I don't really want to talk about my crazy brain on this space. Although, if this were really my morning pages, I probably would. So maybe I need to think about that. Um, yeah, just like I think having worked in technology for as long as I have, there's just we don't we don't really know why weird things happen, but sometimes things happen that are just really, really too weird to seem like it's an accident. Um, and I think we live in a time, or, you know, uh, we have adaptive programming. So, software that essentially, like, you can have an AI that does its own adaptive programming. So, it's programming itself. And you have hacking, and you have hacking where, like, I had a whole conversation once about like whether hacking is going to become no longer a thing or no longer a concern, and I think it is a really difficult one because if you don't know when something is a robot doing it on behalf of a human, or it's a robot going rogue, or if it's a human who's operating under the guise of it's just a robot, then you get kind of like a big mess. Um, yeah, you get a big mess. Um, but it's kind of a catch 22 because we can't live in a world where we just stop investing in technology. I mean, there are people who think that you can just stop investing in all forms of, let's say, internet web technology. Mm, and to that, I would say, well, that would cause a public health crisis. I think the whole TikTok shutdown is a really good example of how you actually could never shut down TikTok now. It's sort of like you we might acknowledge all the bad things that it does and all the bad things that it causes, but it's kind of and yeah, we can acknowledge all the bad things it does and all the bad things it causes. And I've heard it compared to digital fentanyl, which I think is pretty accurate. It's like um because it functions the same way that any drug does, but you can't just like how do you treat that on a public level? You can't just like get rid of something that people are requiring to survive, unless you take a standpoint of kind of like a cruel, just like you know, let everybody suffer and let them figure it out. But I mean, I think it's also more than that. I think that you like when you look at the volume of users on TikTok and on Instagram and different programs like that, like when you look at the volume of users and how frequently people are using it, um, that would be so drastic to have people like. I think that if there isn't already research to show and support how it is required for people's health to be um, like a using a using their phones as frequently as they are with video, video, short form video, and maybe longer form video and stuff. But like, there's plenty of research that supports that you can't just take it away and think people are going to be able to maintain their stasis that allows them to survive. You're not going to be able to just rip something like that away from them. It's kind of like if you had a massive amount of any other drug users and you said, well, we're just going to rip it away from them and hope that they can survive. I don't think that, like, first of all, that's deeply inhumane, but along with that, I just don't think that people, like, you would have a lot of people just not able to survive, and then we would have more crises than we are prepared or able to handle. Um, the whole TikTok shutdown is interesting because, um, so I lost TikTok in some form because I deleted the app and then you couldn't re-download it. But tons and tons and tons of people who didn't delete the app lost it for maybe a day or 2 days, and then they like had it again. And so yeah, so I think there's like an underestimation or a lack of awareness of how much time people are spending in that virtual space, what it means for people's livelihoods, because so many people make money off of it. And like, I genuinely think that there are people who their main activity is producing content and consuming content on that app. Which kind of ties back into what I was starting to say in my article that I mean, it's not really an article. I wouldn't call it an article because I don't think I've done enough fidelity to call it that. It's a short essay, whatever, about what happens when like the arts kind of take over. And I think that, yeah, producing video content is a form of artistic expression. So yeah, maybe I'll knit those thoughts together of the explosion of content creation, specifically TikTok, and the rise of arts-based economies, maybe something like that. Like, I kind of hate that thought, because like, all economies are arts-based in some form, I think. But yeah, weird stuff happens in digital spaces, and I think there's like a lot of lack of public knowledge about what's actually behind. I call them glitter boxes. I call phones glitter boxes because it's just like sparkliness that we want to be staring into. Yeah, I think there's like a lot more lack of knowledge about how it works, and that's shared among people, and then it becomes weird. Specifically, like how uniquely configured everyone's phones can become for them. And then people can assume that everyone's phone has the same features and functionality and works the same ways as theirs does, or, you know, for the most part. And in reality, they become very, 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 very specifically configured for each user. And so, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I've kind of noticed as a lack of knowledge among people, is that everyone's phones and digital ecosystems are highly personal and configured to you specifically. And the more that we have like adaptive programming and AI programming, the more that they're going to become even more specifically catered to you and your brain and your way of working in a virtual space. And that just becomes more like, it's almost as though that can kind of create like I always think of that image in The Matrix where you have the babies and like they're each feeding the machine. We might not be babies, but if we each live in this like very, very, very specifically catered world for ourselves digitally, and we have no space to each be able to talk about like what that virtual world looks like for us, or how it's configured specifically for us, then we just are kind of like all walking around in this bubble and not really, we lose that ability to to have be empowered to, we lose the ability to kind of like be empowered over the very powerful technology that's running our lives. So